progress is being made. Now, I want to say a couple of things. I'm not sanding the seams, I'm scraping them. Big difference. Sanding takes forever to get a seam smooth and perfect. I don't need the seam smooth and perfect. I just need them not visible. Big difference. This is an organic being. Things are not straight lined. They're curvy. I mean, look at the muscular textures on this. So what I'm doing is I'm scraping the seams flat, which is taking off some of the detail around it. I'm going to take some Aves epoxy sculpt and I'm going to pretty much roll it out in tiny thin braids and then lay it over the seams to hide them. So I'm trying to imitate the surface detail. Okay? So again, I'm not trying to pull the seams off this thing. I'm trying to hide them. And since this is an organic thing, hiding the seams should be fairly easy. The bad one's going to be that one. That's going to be the hard seam to hide. I've got almost all the seams scraped down on this guy. Very thin, very fine. They're pretty much gone. You can't feel them anymore. I have a couple of spots like that one right there where I clipped it too close to the sprue. But I did that quite on purpose. And I got some bad seams around the tail joint to take care of. And that's going to take some work because those basically have to be rescored out. I can't scrape those. They need to be scored out like a panel line on an airplane. But other than this tail, I've got all the seams done, including on the feet. We're ready to start putting detail back on. Now, the feet and parts of this guy's head are going to be different. I'm going to have to do something about his nose because I can't really scrape the detail along here too much because it'll be gone. That's going to have to be sanded, puttied, and filed like normal. Okay? The feet, I'm going to try to fill these seams and hide them with some Mr. Surfacer and a damp sponge. We're going to see what that does because it's got the same appearance as some of you guys put on your Mach A figures. Kind of rusted and pitted. It's got a pitted appearance to it. So I'm going to try to replace the detail that way on that. And that's kind of true about some of this. If I can put some thick Mr. Surfacer on here with a brush to imitate what's already there, that could probably hide that seam fairly well. And again, along here, I've already cleaned up all the seam along here, so I just have to fix a little bit of it up. So here's my update. I'm not sanding. I'm using the back of my X-Acto blade, the flat spot, and I'm basically doing this. And you can see all the shavings all over my desk right here. Okay? So that's how I'm cleaning up the seams, and I've almost got them all cleaned up except for along that tail. That's what I'm doing next. So I'll be back in a bit. Alright, working on the big G in his seams. Now, I tried something earlier with some Bondo body putty. I'm going to have to get that off there. I don't think that came out well at all. It doesn't seem to, it's hiding the textures more than it's helping. I tried to doing this with Aves the other night, and my Aves skills were not up for the task at that time. But, there it is. I did this leg right here, and a little bit of sanding work, that leg's going to come out okay. Right there, let's zoom in on that. It don't look like much right now. Okay? Yeah, it wants to focus on everything but the leg, like normal. It's simply because I need to put the part closer to the camera, but if I do that, it goes out of the light. So, there you go. You can see, I'm getting the textures in there. That was near the end of Aves curing time, though, so that was not good. I need to sand that down and refine it a little bit. This side went much better. Now I need to sand it and redo some of that because I don't like how it looks. But this side went much better with the textures. Okay? Tonight I tried something different on the tail. Let's zoom that out a little bit because again, it wants to focus on everything but what I'm trying to show you guys. And this camera's resolution is good enough. I think you guys can see it. I'm doing something different with the tail here. Now, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it's replicating the textures much better than what I was doing the other night. Basically, I'm keeping everything wet. Letting the Aves set until it dries a little bit. Then I'm scoring lines in there with my X-Acto knife. I tried using this clay working tool here, but it just picks the aves up and pulls it right off. My X-Acto knife's doing a better job of scoring those lines in there. So that's what I'm doing to get the seams filled. This is going really, really fast, which is a happy thought to me, because I'm not trying to be nice and neat with it. Once I get that on there, I'm going to lightly sand the surface down so it's more closely matching the other detail on the rest of the body. And at the rate I'm going with this, I will get his arms done and his legs done and this tail done very quickly. We're talking, I'd probably get them all done in about 4 or 5 hours, which means Godzilla is going to be ready for some painting real soon, and that's going to make me happy. Now, I gotta let that dry, sand it, see how it comes out before I can commit and say this is great. But right now it looks like it's doing the job I needed to. So I'll be back later on Godzilla. Now, I started working on his seams. Right here is where the most troublesome seams are along the tail. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. I'm nowhere near done with those. They're preliminary. So keep this in mind. Okay? Now, that is Abe's epoxy sculpt. In a little bit, I'm going to come back and detail how I did the seams along here. Okay? But I'm trying to imitate the textures that are right beside them. Where I run my finger over there, I don't feel any visible seam. Okay, and you can see I am duplicating that texture with the difference in the lighting. Now, again, I'm going to detail what I did there in a little bit, not just on this video. This stripe along here, I painted some Mr. Surfacer to kind of help me hide that seam. Now we're getting to the big spot, the seam down the center of his body. You can see when I turn it sideways the differences in the light. I spent about 45 minutes to an hour with a teeny paintbrush just dotting Mr. Surfacer on there to give it a molted texture, kind of like scales. There's also some Mr. Surfacer running around on his head in a few places because the crack on his nose did not want to seal up. I gotta get that sealed up. Also plan to take my pin vise and drill out some nostrils, because Godzilla has nostrils and this model doesn't. We're going to give him some nostrils. Alright? So looking at this, I can see I need to come in here and do a little bit more dotting because I can see some seams in some places. Sorry about going off camera. But it really doesn't look all that bad. Is it going to focus? Oh yeah, it's focusing up a little closer. Funny thing is, I'm actually holding this thing 3 feet from the camera. This thing's got a hell of a zoom. But anyhow, there's some spots of Mr. Surfacer in places because I'm trying to fine-tune the seams. But you can see the dotted pattern on that. And, you know, when I look at the detailed photos that the pros built of this model, they have a dotted pattern there, and then it goes kind of groovy down here. So there you go. I'm working the seams. Again, I'll be back in the next short segment to detail what I'm doing along here so you guys can see it. It needs a little bit more work. It's still a little rough in places, but that's where I'm at with the seams. Okay? And I'll show you how to make a texture stamp, but I'm not using a texture stamp on this for a couple of reasons. One, the textures vary greatly all over this model. I mean, by his arms, you've got muscular type texture, whereas on his chest, it's a dotted texture. On his feet, it's a texture you would get if you were to take a wet sponge and dab it everywhere. So, texture stamps, I would have to make 30 or 40 texture stamps just to get this thing. I'm not doing that. So I'm going to continue what I'm doing with the Mr. Surfacer and the Abe's epoxy sculpt. And again, I'm going to show you what I did with that in the next segment. I can't do it tonight. I got to get to bed. So, back in a bit.